at the Rock Health and Wellness Center, and you are listening to Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. This is Wednesday, December 6th, and we are coming to you right here from the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios and 98.7 Walk by Faith Radio and 1420 AM Lubbock Christian Nation. We're glad to be here tonight. This is our book review night. I think you guys are going to love this show. It's going to be a very interesting piece of information for you, and coming from a person that's actually walking right through the middle of the problem, wrote a book about it. So it's going to be a great show, and I hope you guys will enjoy it. We're going to talk about the Walls Protocol. The Walls Protocol: How I Beat Progressive MS Using Paleo Principles and Functional Medicine by Dr. Terry Walls, MD. It's a fantastic book. It's the subject is multiple sclerosis and how she beat multiple sclerosis, or she is dealing with it, turned it back in her life, but it has a lot to do with general health for all of us. So I think it's going to be a great show. I want to start by just talking about some of the praises and the things that happened today in the office. And you guys have watched this show. You guys have been with us. You've been listening to it, and I appreciate that. One of the things that that kind of hit me today as I was thinking about what are some of the praises that happened. You know, the cool thing about my job is I get to see lots of people from lots of different ages, and I get to see lots of different socioeconomic groups. I get to see lots of different professions. And I was just thinking about all the people. I had a pretty good long conversation with one of my police officers tonight who's in drug enforcement, I guess, narcotics or whatever. And we were just the difficulties that he deals with in his job. And he was telling me about how much fentanyl's on the ground out there and how many people are dealing with that and how complicated that is. And there's just so many different layers of it that he deals with. And I kind of smiled for a second. I said, I'm trying to get people to quit eating sugar, and you're trying to get people to quit taking fentanyl. It's like, dang, that's tough. It's tough on both of those jobs, but one of them is really tough. So, but then I just started thinking about I've adjusted a doctor today. I've adjusted nurses. I've adjusted truck drivers, UPS drivers. I've adjusted real estate agents. I've adjusted school teachers. I've adjusted computer technology people. The gamut for me is wide open. Clinical psychologists, counselors, little kids, adjusted first graders, and all the way up to 60, 70-year-olds today. So it's really cool when you get an opportunity to spend your day with some really neat people in our community, and you just get to share part of your life with them on a daily basis. And wellness can be, it's not for everybody, we know that, but it can be for everybody. Everybody who wants it can get it if they want it. And so it's kind of fun to see how many different kind of people actually participate in health and wellness. Got retired people, got working class people, got kids, got them all. And it's really cool to see them get adjusted. So that was kind of the praise of the day. And as far as the article of the day goes, I'm just going to get right into the book, because there's a lot of the things that we're going to talk about in this book that you guys are going to enjoy. And we'll get to some articles or some concepts as we're going through the book. And so I just thought it's a pretty thick book. There's a lot of information on it. And so I thought I'd just get into it. It's called The Walls Protocol: How I Beat Progressive MS by Terry Walls, MD. And it's a 2014 copyright. Dr. Walls wrote the book herself. Dr. Walls is a clinical professor of medicine at the University of Iowa, Carver College of Medicine in Iowa City. She has made it her mission to spread the word about the Walls Protocol through the book, her lectures, her website, and food as medicine classes. So she tells the story, and I want to get into the story because last week we broke down the Maker's Diet, and we told Jordan Rubin's story, and it was there was some definite um, feedback that I got from that about some of you that actually just went and got the book and started reading the Maker's Diet. So this one is about MS, multiple sclerosis, and so I just want to kind of get into it right here. So it starts off in the introduction, and she just starts telling her story. I used to run marathons and climb mountains in Nepal. I've competed multiple. I've competed multiple times in the American Birkbeiner 54-kilometer cross-country ski marathon, once while pregnant, earned a black belt in Taekwondo, and won a bronze medal in the women's full contact free sparring at the trials for the 1978 Pan American Games in Washington, D.C. I used to feel invincible. Then I developed multiple sclerosis. After decades of troubling symptoms I tried to ignore, I was finally diagnosed in 2000. So she got her first diagnosis in 2000. And then her body just kept declining. The disease had a good footing in her central nervous system. Her decline progressed rapidly. Within 2 years of her diagnosis, she could no longer play soccer with her kids in the backyard. By the fall of 2003, walking from room to room from my hospital rounds exhausted me. And by the summer of 2004, my back and stomach muscles had weakened so much that I needed a tilt recline wheelchair. Within 3 years of initial diagnosis, my disease had transitioned from relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis into secondary progressive multiple sclerosis. In 3 years, it attacked her. It attacked her quickly. It got after her. It took a person that was full of life and full of activity, and just basically put her in a wheelchair and really got after her bad. And in that phase, disability slowed progresses despite increasingly aggressive therapy. By 2007, I spent most of my time lying in a zero gravity chair. I was 52 years old. So she went from full of life, and in a 7 year period of time, she just spent her time sitting in a chair that with nothing that she could do because that that the immune system had attacked. That's what happens in multiple sclerosis is the immune system attacks, and it attacks the body. And we're going to get into that in a little bit because we know we've talked about that. It's not mistakenly attacking. And the way that she says it in the book is pretty cool. So, you know, she goes on because she says, like most physicians, I was focused on quickly diagnosing my patients and then using drugs and surgical procedures to treat them. That's it. I mean, that is until I became a patient myself. Conventional medicine was failing me. I saw that. I was headed towards a bedridden life. Since the beginning of our profession, physicians have used self experimentation either to prove a scientific point or to treat themselves with conventional treatments that were limited value. In that tradition, and in the face of this chronic progressive disease for which there was no cure, I began to experiment on myself. So, being a medical doctor herself, and I say this all the time from a wellness standpoint, what are you going to get when you go into a sick care world? You're going to get drugs or surgery or physical therapy. Those are your three options. You're not going to get wellness. You're going to get drugs, surgery, or you go in, you have high blood pressure. What are they going to do? They're going to put you on blood pressure medication. You go in with anxiety, they're going to put you on anti-anxiety medication. You go in with acid reflux, they're going to put you on some sort of acid reflux medication. If they don't have a drug for it, then they're going to give you physical therapy. If you go in with some sort of bursitis in your shoulder, right, they're going to give you a combination of both of them. But when you get sick and you get something like MS, it doesn't matter if you're a regular person or if you're a medical doctor. She's saying these things right here. Conventional medicine was failing me. I began to experiment on myself. I not only, and she said, what I didn't expect were the stunning results I got from my self experimentation. I not only arrested my disease, I achieved a dramatic restoration of my health and my function What I learned changed forever how I saw battling the world of health and disease. Yeah, welcome to the party, right? And what did we talk about last night? We were talking about subjective and objective, and we were talking about subjective is your feeling and objective is your function. And that's a big word that she used right there. I achieved a dramatic restoration of my health and my function, not her symptoms, not her feelings, her function. So it was great. And then she used this quote that we use in chiropractic a lot, and she said more than 100 years ago, Thomas Edison said, and here's the quote: "The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will interest his patients in the care of the human frame, in a proper diet, and in the cause of prevention of disease." Let me read that again. The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will interest his patients in the care of the human frame, in a proper diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease. That's what we do in wellness every day. The doctors of the future are the guys that are the wellness people. They're for those who want wellness, and wellness doesn't come in a pill, and it doesn't come in surgery, and it comes when you get your body back in the environment that's congruent with health, and then your body starts to express health. So she gets into her diagnosis a little bit, and she talks about the stress and the pressure of medical school may have triggered her first symptoms in 1980. So she goes all the way back to 1980, and she got her first diagnosis in 2000. So remember, that's what we talked about last night was subjective. There are things going on inside your body that you can't feel, and she started to get her first symptoms in 1980, years before I had any idea what they were. I would eventually call them zingers, intense stabs of facial pain. They lasted just a moment and would be random and would come randomly, sometimes in waves. The episodes building over a week or two and then gradually fading over the next several. They were more likely to happen during my busiest and most brutal hospital rotations, with shifts lasting 36 hours and allowing for little sleep. Really? When her immune system wasn't functioning properly, when her immune system got confused, and that's what she's going to say here in just a minute, was her immune system got confused, that's when the symptoms were the worst. When she didn't get her sleep, when she didn't eat properly, when she didn't have time to exercise, those are the times that her body functioned the worst, right? And there were things happening, there were things that were happening to her before you get the zinger. Before she got the zinger, there was a process happening inside of her body that she couldn't feel. Did we get that? I hope we get that. I hope that concept makes sense, because there are things happening in your body that you cannot feel. So when you say, I feel fine, I don't need to see a wellness doctor. That's not that that doesn't even make any sense. Like, it's not how you feel, it's how you function. And because eventually, if something's going on inside your body, it's going to catch up to you. And then you're going to end up in that, you are going to end up functioning wrong. So she went through that, and she talks about her, just how it just kept going, and it kept getting worse, and it kept getting worse for her, and it kept getting worse for her, and her decline. And it was just, it was, she talks about in the summer of 2000, she moved from Wisconsin to Iowa to accept a joint appointment as assistant professor at the University of Iowa in the primary care at the VA hospital. She was newly diagnosed with MS. So I was taking Copaxone, which my physician had described for the MS. And I'm going to get in that in a minute. But she said something happened to her. She goes along here. Something happened that changed my life in 2002. My neurology doctor at the Cleveland Clinic noted that I was slowly getting worse and suggested I check out Ashton Embry's MS charity website, Direct MS, at www.direct-ms.org. Dr. Embry is a geologist with a PhD whose son has MS. Dr. Embry's son improved dramatically by changing his diet. So Dr. Embry became an active and vocal proponent of the link between diet and multiple sclerosis. This was the first I'd heard of such an idea, or at least the first time I'd paid attention. Although it sounded a little like alternative care, which is really interesting, right? To me, and being a conventional doctor, I didn't put much stock into what I saw as fringe medical practices. This was a suggestion from my neurologist, so I took her seriously and I decided to check into it. That's one of the things that we battle every single day in wellness. We battle this mentality that there's real doctors and there's not real doctors, and there maybe you need to go to a real doctor instead of going to a chiropractor. Maybe you need to go someplace where they really know what's going on, right? We fight that mentality, and all that mentality is by design. That's not an accident. It's not an accident that it took place like that, right? But it's all fun and games until it's you. It's all fun and games until you're the one that has MS, and you've turned to that sick care model, and that sick care model's let you down. And now, what are you going to do? You're going to turn to that alternative. Well, it's alternative. It's alternative if you're in the sick care world in the first place. This is alternative medicine. In my world, they're alternative medicine. They're the ones that we turn to when nothing else works for us. And so it's just a way you look at things, but it's really funny because what she says here is she says, I didn't put much stock into what I saw as fringe medical practices. This was a suggestion from my neurologist. So I took her seriously and I decided to check it out. So as soon as a medical doctor said it, that maybe you should check out this website where you can actually change your MS and your health with your diet, then it all of a sudden it had value to the person. And it's just kind of funny to me because it's like, yeah, that's good. Well, what's stuff we say every single day? Welcome to the party, right? It's just part of the deal. So she goes in there. She says his website was full of scientific references, which I began to read one by one. The articles were from peer-reviewed journals written by scientists from highly respected medical schools. This wasn't soft science. This wasn't fringe. This was legitimate research. Kind of like my whole entire life is just soft science. Like none of the stuff that we do in wellness is actual real science. It's just fringe, right? That's ridiculous. That's not what we're about. Everything we do has some sort of scientific background behind it. Some sort of neurology or physiology that goes along with it, right? So I'm not trying to get all upset about it. It's just the attitude. It's the attitude that we have to deal with sometimes from the people out there that think they know it all, and then they say, well, all your stuff is just pseudoscience or whatever. I read that stuff on social media too. It's all that stuff's ridiculous. But let's go ahead. I determined that Dr. Embry was not a charlatan and that maybe he was onto something. Yeah, that's really cute. He was onto something. It's like that whole diet thing has been going on for thousands of years on the planet. But she went on through there and she found this book by Dr. Lauren Cordain. Dr. Cordain linked changes in the human diet to the development of chronic disease in Western society. He had published a number of articles and had also recently published a book for the public called The Paleo Diet: Lose Weight and Get Healthy by Eating the Foods You Were Designed to Eat. So if you want another book to read, maybe we ought to break that one down too. The Paleo Diet: Lose Weight and Get Healthy by Eating the Foods You Were Designed to Eat. She says, I began to absorb information more quickly. Molecular mimicry, leaky gut, lectins, immune modulation. See, it's funny when those guys come to the wellness party, they start talking about lectins. They start talking about the things that we talk about when we're talking about cashews and that type of deal. So they talk about immune modulations. I began to see where Dr. Embry and Dr. Cordain were going with their theories. I began to consider that what we eat has a major rather than minor influence on how our bodies work. I was particularly interested in the idea that excessive carbohydrates and sugars in our modern diet lead to excess insulin and inflammation. You've heard that before, right? So she's coming to the party. I had been a vegetarian since my college days, and I love my beans and rice. I love making bread. Could I really cut out grain, dairy, and legumes, the current staple of my diet? But I wanted to arrest my disease more than anything else. That's a sentence I wrote, and I wrote next to it in my book right here. Her why was big enough. You know, she didn't want to give up her bread. She didn't want to give up her rice. She didn't want to give up her beans. She like, could I really do that? I'm a vegetarian. What do you mean? I'm going to eat meat? Like, are you kidding me? Like all of these things were arguable enough until her why got big enough. Her sentence right here was, could I really cut out grains, dairy, and legumes, the current staples of my diet? Question mark. But I wanted to arrest my disease more than anything else. When all of a sudden your health becomes the most important thing in your life, you will do whatever it takes to get your health right. And if you're not doing whatever it takes to get your health right, it's not important to you. That's what my point. That's what I talk about when I talk about that whole idea of your why. I was hopeful about this change, but despite this switch to a paleo diet, my decline continued. Big statement right there. Her decline continued in the beginning because wellness is not microwave stuff. Wellness is not instant gratification. Wellness is a process that takes time, especially if you're 52 years old and you've been diagnosed with MS. You didn't just develop MS overnight. It was a process that took time. And if it takes time to develop that process, it takes time to address that process. And so what we want is we want to start taking our fish oil, or we want to start taking our vitamin D, or we want to start cutting out our sugar, and then we want immediately to be successful. And that's not the way it works. We don't turn to success immediately. So I couldn't play soccer in the backyard with my kids without falling. I couldn't take long hikes with the Cub Scouts and Girl Scouts. Then it became harder to even take short walks. So, but I was determined. Some of the entries on Dr. Embry's website said the recovery took 5 years. There you go. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. So she just stayed after it. Meanwhile, I rearranged my schedule to avoid walking. My doctor told me that it was time to get a scooter, and then I changed his mind and suggested a tilt recline wheelchair because of the worsening fatigue. He also suggested I try taking mitoxantrone, I don't know these words, a form of chemotherapy. When that didn't help, I switched to a new potent immune suppression medication called Tysabri. But because people were dying from the activation of latent viruses in their brain, it was pulled off the market. So then my doctor suggested that I take Cellcept, a transplant medication, which would suppress my immune cells. It's backwards. It's backwards. Suppressing your immune system is backwards. Autoimmune suppression is backwards. Because you don't, whenever you're doing that, you're not taking into consideration that you have an innate intelligence. You're not taking into consideration that those immune cells are doing what they are being asked to do. They're not making a mistake. They're doing what you're telling them to do. They're attacking something for some reason. So that didn't work either, right? I often had mouth ulcers after that. My skin was gray. I started every day tired and despair gnawed at me each night. As I lay in bed, it was just horrible. She just goes through that the whole thing, but she wasn't going to give up on this new way of starting to work on her diet. So she stayed after it. And then more searching led me to articles in which mouse brains and their mitochondria had been protected using vitamins and supplements like coenzyme Q, carnitine, and creatine. So now she's starting to get into it where she's starting to read some about mitochondria. And we've talked about mitochondria lots of times on the show, right? The mitochondria is the power plant of the cell. The mitochondria is what produces the energy of the cell. So she started looking into that sort of thing. I didn't have anything to lose, so I decided to take action. I translated those mouse doses into human sized ones and then made an appointment with my primary care doctor. She looked over my list and decided the supplements were likely safe. Mhm. She entered into each one of my medication lists one by one to check for potential adverse interactions with my medication. I've had that said to me before too. Can't take my fish oil because it will affect my medication. I can't take my B vitamins because it might affect my medication. That's an interesting concept when you think about that. Why do you have that in the first place? There were none. I was excited about starting my new experimental vitamin and supplement routine. I began to take them, but was disappointed when nothing happened. After a couple of months, I stopped taking them, and a few days later, I couldn't get out of bed. When I resumed the supplements, I could get up again. They were helping after all. They were helping. It was just really slow. It wasn't an overnight thing because supplements, especially whole food supplements, it takes a little while for your body to incorporate them into cellular function. It takes a little while for your body uh, to get recharged back up. We're fixing to go on a break, and so this is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. It's our book review night, The Walls Protocol by Terry Walls, MD. We'll be right back right after these messages. So sometimes the best way to know if something is working is to stop doing it and watch yourself decline just a little bit, which is it's always been a challenge in the health and wellness world because how do you measure what doesn't happen? If you're doing good and you're doing good next year and you're doing good next year and you're doing good next year, and it's like, well, I don't think this is really working because I'm still doing good. Like I'm still functioning fine. I'm not sure this is helping me. Well, it's hard to measure that it's helping you and making you better when a lot of this subjective complaint doesn't exist. It's just objective. And then that's why I love CrossFit so much because we can test how you're functioning. We can test whether or not you do how you can do an exercise and does that exercise can you do it better than you did it last year? We can look at you and say, hey, are you lifting 10-pound weights now or 15-pound weights or 20-pound weights when last year you weren't? That's those are things that are measurable, but you're feeling good and you're functioning good. And and so but when you're doing some of these wellness things like taking your vitamin D and taking your fish oil, the only way that you know for sure is you do the blood test and you find out, hey, am I actually functioning better? So um, it's an interesting it's one of the process. It's part of the process. It's part of the process when you're working on wellness is to do all things. I really truly believe that. I believe that for many years now. If you want to be well, do well things and keep doing them and keep doing them and keep doing them. And it's better. That's that's one of the cool things I learned from Jordan Peterson when he talked about set yourself up with the best thing that you can think about doing today and then set your whole think of the best thing that you could do today and set your day up to achieve that goal, right? What is your best option when it comes to health? Well, your best option is to do healthy things. There's not a better option than that. There's not a quick fix option that's going to, I mean, how many people right now are taking Ozempic or Mangiano or whatever, right? They're trying to get that quick fix option. That they just want it, and it's out there. And everybody knows it's out there, and there's a ton of people that are taking it because we just want that quick fix option. We're not willing to do well things over time. It's it's but if you stick with it and you do well things over time, one of the most awesome things about that is you become well. Happens almost every single time. Okay, everybody, we're back. This is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. It's Wednesday, December 6th, and we are breaking down the Walls Protocol by Terry Walls, How I Beat Progressive MS Using Paleo Principles in Functional Medicine. So she started to change her diet. She started to take her supplements. And one of the things, if you're out there dealing with MS, one of the things as part of the Walls Protocol is she discovered E-stem, which is electric stem. And this is something that if you're actually dealing with that, this might actually be something good for you. She said, next, I discovered electrical therapy. I got the idea by reviewing a research protocol that used electrical stimulation of muscles to treat people who'd become paralyzed due to an acute spinal injury. So she started that, and it actually helped. It actually she was able to do things because she put that electric stem on the paraspinal muscles on the spine on the muscles on each side of her spine, and she was able to um, develop some muscle tone and get that together. And by firing those muscles, remember when you start to fire muscles, what you're doing is neurology. You're not building the muscle first. You're building the efficiency of the nerve that runs from the muscle to the brain. That's what you're building when you're working on muscles. So in multiple sclerosis, what it means is you get these little plaquings. You get these, I like to think of them as like potholes in your brain or in your spinal cord. You can get these little areas where the immune system has attacked and now it's eaten like a little divot or a pothole or like a plaque, a scab type of thing in different areas. It can be in your brain, it can be in your spinal cord. And so it can disrupt the flow of energy that's flowing from the brain to the muscle. And when you disrupt that flow of energy, what you'll get is you'll get muscle atrophy. And that will start to make that muscle go away. And that atrophy makes that you're weaker and you can't hold yourself together. So one of the things that she adds in there is the muscle stem. So she discovered functional medicine is the next one right there. So every night after everyone else was asleep, I searched the internet looking for more information that might help me. One night I stumbled onto the web page for for Functional Medicine and was immediately intrigued. Its goal was to provide clinicians like myself with a better way to care for people with complex chronic disease by looking at how the interaction between genetics, diet, hormone balance, toxin exposure, infections, and psychological factors contributed to the development of the disease or the improvement of one's health and vitality. It's a big sentence right there, but you know what we talk about? We talk about physical, chemical, and mental emotional stress. The old chiropractors used to say toxins, trauma, and autosuggestion. So those things right there is exactly what is when you get into functional medicine. And she got into one of the courses that the Institute for Functional Medicine offered was neuroprotection, a functional medicine approach for common and uncommon neurologic symptoms. So she ordered it and she started studying it. And she also understood that it was likely that I had a genetic vulnerability or several that had increased the likelihood that I'd develop multiple sclerosis. I finally had a much deeper understanding of the significance of the brain, leaky gut, food allergies, toxins, mitochondria that were not providing enough energy for the cell, neurotransmitter problems, and the impact of having insufficient enzymes for the metabolism of vitamin B and sulfur. Based on what I now knew, I had a much longer list of vitamins, minerals, and amino acids, antioxidants, and essential fatty acids that I understood were helpful for mitochondria and brain cells. How many times have we heard that on our show? You got to keep the power plant on to the cell. Got to keep the power on to the brain in order for the brain to work. Got to keep the power on to the heart in order for the heart to work. So you got to keep that. You got to keep that mitochondria going. This is a really big sentence right here. I finally understood why my brain was on fire, under attack by my immune cells. And I also had some idea what I could do to cool the fire of inflammation that were raging there. That we started this in September 1st, and we've been talking about that same thing right there. We got to cool the immune system down. We got to calm the immune system down. We got to cool the flame down. That's what those omega 6s do, is omega 6s increase inflammation, omega 3s decrease inflammation. And that process is what it's all about right there. So she started in on that, and she started she started looking into the paleo diet, and she started looking at what foods and what was going on from a paleo standpoint right there. So she started getting those looking, and she's like, I wonder if I could get all that nutrition. I realized that I needed an eating plan specifically designed to maximize my mitochondrial and brain function. There you go. When you're sick and you're trying to get well, what you will do is you will do well things. I'm going to present for consideration that when you're well, if you did those same well things, it might contribute to the idea that might prevent you from getting sick. So, interesting thought. Maybe we get sick because we're not doing well things. And maybe if we would just do well things, then we wouldn't get sick. We wouldn't have some of these things that we're dealing with. And I don't know. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting. She After 3 months, I'm going to skip down. After 3 months of practicing the new diet, gradually increasing my E-stim exercises, and practicing daily meditation and simple self-massage, I could walk between exam rooms using just one cane. After 6 months, I could walk throughout the entire hospital without a cane. But it wasn't just my body that had changed. I experienced and saw the world very differently. This is a great little paragraph right here. The old me, the conventional internal medicine physician, had been struck down like Paul on the way to Damascus. The old me, who had relied on drugs and procedures to make my patients well, who had been made progressively more feeble by my illness, had been replaced with someone who understood intellectually and physically that disease begins at the cellular level. This is a medical doctor talking about this now. The disease begins at the cellular level. Turn the power off to the cell. You got to protect those mitochondria. How do you protect mitochondria? First thing you do is take your fish oil so that your 6:3 ratio is right, so that your cell wall is right, so that you can get your antioxidants built up like glutathione inside the cell, and you can protect the mitochondria. When cells are starved of the building blocks they need to conduct the chemistry of life properly, and that the root of the optimal health begins with taking away the things that harm and confuse our cells while providing the body with the right environment in which to thrive, I finally understood what I had to do to provide my cells with all the building blocks of life that they needed to heal. I was doing it, and it was working. This completely altered how I practice medicine. When they come to the party and they see the truth, they start to get it. I began teaching residents and patients in our primary care clinics how to care for themselves in a way I had only just discovered as optimal, using diet and health behaviors for diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, mood disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders, and traumatic brain injury, instead of relying on drugs. The residents learned that diet and lifestyle are powerful treatments, often as effective, if not more so, than drugs. The patients in the traumatic brain injury clinic were also eager to learn what things they could do to speed the healing of their brains. In patient after patient, I watched symptoms and the need for drugs decrease as diet and lifestyle improved. What an amazing story. When she came to the party, she actually didn't get stuck in that pride. She actually learned something, and then she started teaching all the people around her. This medical doctor started showing her people that diet and lifestyle improved diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, mood disorders, post traumatic stress, and traumatic brain injury. Right? Yep. So it's real interesting. She when she was at the VA, she wanted to do some research because she is a medical doctor and she believes that you got to have research for everything, right? Get those double-blind, clinically controlled trials that was not used to use the drugs that she used. Remember on the drugs, the chemotherapy drug and the other drugs that they were asking her to use. I was the doctor recommended that they take midoxantrone, a form of chemotherapy. When that didn't help, I switched to a new potent immune suppressant medication called Tysabri. But before I went in for my third injection, it was pulled off the market because people were dying from the activation of latent viruses in their brains. And then I went to Cellcept, a transplant medicine, which would suppress my immune cells. Now, let me ask you, if we go back, I bet you, I don't know this for a fact, but I'd be willing to bet you, if we go back and look at the double-blind clinically controlled trials, none of them were on MS on these drugs. That is a form of chemotherapy she was taking. I know they didn't do a clinically controlled trial on the gold standard of things on MS for that drug. I'd be willing to bet you it wasn't there, right? So it's kind of interesting. All those things that your doctor says, well, you should take this because it was made for something else, but we're going to use it for this off label. It went through all the FDA based on one thing, which is a bunch of crap anyway. But then it got all the way through, and they're using it for something else. So she actually got to be on TED Talks. So you can look for her if you want. Dr. Terry Walls on TED Talks. In my TED Talk, I explain the specifics of my intensive nutritional plan, and I challenge people to become ambassadors for their mitochondria and to eat for health. At the end of November, that TED Talk, Minding Your Mitochondria, was placed on YouTube. It spread into the paleo community, the MS community, and the functional medicine community. Within a year, that lecture had more than 1 million views. I touch more lives than most physicians or scientists will touch in their lifetimes. I felt like I was helping to change the world for the better, and that was exhilarating because I wanted to do even more. That's a super good story. Like, good for her. That's what she got into. And so the book continues, and it talks about the science of life and disease, and it gets into um, the she starts talking about mastering the Walls diet. So she actually gets into the diet and into the paleo diet and some of the things that you might want to consider about how you want to eat. And she talks about the 9 cups. She's really big on green leafy vegetables. She's really big on colors of vegetables and fruits and sulfur rich vegetables. So that's a big thing for her on all of the nutrients. The 3 cups of leafy greens. She talks about B vitamins, the vitamin precursors that you get from the whole food, the 3 cups of colors, and the different kinds of vegetables that are there, and the 3 cups of sulfur rich vegetables. And she talks about this. I want you to eat 3 cups of sulfur rich vegetables, which, in addition to antioxidants, also have healthy promoting sulfur compounds in them. Sulfur may not get the media attention that antioxidants do, but it's an incredibly important compound for health. Sulfur rich foods nourish cells and mitochondria and specifically help the body to be more efficient at eliminating toxins. Sulfur is also important in synthesizing proteins and for producing collagen, which makes up your connective tissue. If you have joint issues, you need sulfur. It also helps give you strong, beautiful skin, hair, and nails. Diets containing sulfur have been associated with improvement in skin disorders and arthritis. Interesting, right there. Many arthritis sufferers take a supplement called MSM and to help with joint pain, but I like to get my sulfur on my dinner plate so it comes natural and complete package. There are literally thousands of studies showing the health benefits of the compound of the sulfur rich family. One of the most relevant pathways for research in sulfur rich vegetables involves the contribution to the blood vessel health. This should matter a great deal to anyone with multiple sclerosis as well as those with other autoimmune problems. As I noted earlier in chapter 2, the Dr. Paulo Zambroni was published studies reporting that those with multiple sclerosis were more likely to have blockages in their veins than that drain the brain, which can lead to chronic cerebrospinal venous insufficiency. Sulfur vegetables are naturally non-surgical way to address this potent issue. So if you have clogged veins in your brain and you can't get your body to get rid of it, this is Dr. Wall's opinion, is that sulfur-rich food. The cabbage family, the cruciferous and family is also called the cabbage family and includes kale, collards, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, turnips, rutabaga, and radishes. The brassica family vegetables are rich in many organic sulfur compounds, including DIM. That's a bunch of them. So there's lots of good things in cabbage. And the onion family, she's big on the onions as well. So we don't talk about that as much. And then the mushrooms. Mushrooms, the last category of sulfur-rich vegetable, consists of mushrooms, which are not only rich in sulfur, but also B vitamins. Mushrooms in particular have been used medicinally in Asia for thousands of years. We know they contain beta-D-glucan and some other components of the cell wall of mushrooms, and that the compounds stimulate the natural killer cells that help balance the immune system and are protective against cancer and autoimmune disease. Mushrooms are an excellent and delicious addition to the diet, but with one caveat. Some individuals with autoimmune disorders are sensitive to mushrooms. I'll talk more about it in chapter 6 when I discuss fermented foods, but if you perceive that you have more headaches, fatigue, or worsening, or any brain symptoms after consuming mushrooms, I suggest removing them from your diet at least temporarily. So that's part of it. So she'll get into the Wall's diet and the different part of the Wall's diet. She gets into reducing the toxic load, and she gets into exercise. And what one of the things that she said in here was really interesting, because she made the same statement that we've made on the show in the past when she says there's anti-nutrients. So there's certain foods that actually give us nutrients, and then there's certain foods that are anti-nutrients foods. And I totally believe that every bite that we take is either moving us towards health or it's moving us away from health when it comes to nutrition. And that's a big deal. So there is a legitimate reason to stay away from certain foods. And that's the things that we talk about as the refined carbohydrates, right? Some of those, the gluten, the wheat, and the dairy, some of those things like that, that can cause different issues. Those are things that might not move you towards health. Excuse me, that might not move you towards health the way that you want them to. So that's so something you might think about. It's not only eating well, but it's also not eating not well, if that makes any sense. You want to eat good, and you don't want to eat bad. It's pretty simple, really. So she has this chapter 10 is what about drugs, supplements, and alternative medicine? And she gets in here, beyond diet and exercise, there are many interesting therapies to consider while on the Wall's protocol. Many of my patients are very interested in what supplements they should be taking, and I have plenty to say about that. Another is alternative medicine. Should you also be trying some alternative treatments? That same word, right? Alternative medicine. So she says about your medications. A lot of my patients get very excited about the Wall's protocol, and that's excellent. Excitement feeds motivation and helps people stick with the diet, even when it feels challenging. Many of these people, however, also get very impatient about the drugs or medication they are currently taking. They want the Wall's protocol to improve their health, which it will, but they jump the gun and sometimes stop taking their medication in the hope that the Walls protocol will fix everything in a few weeks. This is not how it works. You may begin to feel better almost immediately on the Walls protocol, but if you are on the prescription medications, you must not stop taking your current therapy. This is very important. Do not stop any medications or interventions you are doing right now because you started the Walls protocol. Doing this could be disastrous. And that's not what we get into, but that's I wanted to read that part because I think it's important from a medical doctor's standpoint. And that we don't I don't say anything about it in the office. I don't put you on medication or take you off medication because it doesn't have anything to do with chiropractic wellness and it's not within my scope of practice in the state of Texas. But that was something that she said it takes several months for the Walls protocol to reset your biology and begin the rebuilding process, and then your body must begin the healing process that it's and go through the damage that's already been done. So that was one thing um, that she talked about. Um, there was another one about supplements. A huge part of the wall protocol is the infusion of the body, the cells, and the mitochondria with the essential nutrients required for best possible functioning. This accomplished primarily through diet, with the 9 cups of fruits and vegetables, the organic grass fed or wild caught meat and fish, the seaweed or organic meat and fermented food, and coconut oil, and the other things I recommended ending up in your blender, in your soup pot, in your salad bowl, and ultimately in you. Right? She says the same things we've been talking about, but it wouldn't be a heck of a lot easier to just take some vitamins. Vitamins and minerals act together to facilitate the chemistry of the cells and must be kept in balance, but it is far better, if not easier, to achieve this balance through food. And I 100% agree with that. It would be way better to just get your vitamins and minerals through food. One of the challenging parts is if that food actually has enough vitamin minerals in it, and it may not be true. Um, that being said, I do believe that in cases of deficiency, supplementation in addition to the 9 cups and the other required foods on whichever level of the Walls diet you are participating may be helpful for some people. If you decide to take supplements, always talk to your professional physician prior to starting them. There are certain conditions for which certain supplements may be contraindicated and certain medications with which some supplements could react. I won't necessarily state this on the supplement package or the medication. Yeah, it won't say that. So, um, also, I strongly urge you to begin one supplement at a time. Keep a log of how you feel in your Walls diary, writing down any changes that you see, and particularly note if your head or belly symptoms or skin rashes. If you start several things at once and have a problem, you will not know which caused the problem and which is helpful. It's pretty good right there. It's a pretty good idea. And she also thinks that you should also have a test to test those things and to do the lab work, to check your vitamin D, to check your folate and vitamin B12, your homocysteine levels, your C-reactive proteins, your fasting lipids, your cholesterol. Those are all things that are normal. She's a big fan of vitamin D. A low vitamin D level is associated with higher rates of relapse and more severe disability, and higher levels are associated with higher levels of function. Furthermore, low vitamin D levels are associated with higher rates of autoimmune disease, mental health problems, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. For that reason, I strongly urge you to monitor your vitamin D levels and to be getting an optimal range as a priority. Most natural and effective way to get vitamin D is simply put your skin in the sun. Vitamin D is an interesting vitamin and it actually acts somewhat like a hormone. We make vitamin D from cholesterol as a result of ultraviolet radiation in the sun hitting our skin. We've gone through the vitamin D thing right there. Um, she likes that vitamin D from the sun and the supplements. Calcium, um, because there is a lower intake of calcium in the Walls Paleo approximately and the Walls Plus, I suggest that you consider taking 250 milligrams of calcium citrate once or twice a day, and depending on your age and gender. So she thinks a big deal. Magnesium can be very helpful for reducing spasticity in muscles. Essential fatty acids, omega-3 fatty acids, and gamma linoleic acid is a big deal. Then, and that's and we know that, right? So that's the same thing that we talk about. It's basically everything that we've talked about on the show for the last 3 months is the same thing that Dr. Walls is using to help her overcome the problems that she's having with her MS. So if you've got MS or you got somebody out there that's dealing with MS, the Walls Protocol is an awesome book that you can pick up. I hope you liked it. If you've got interest in it, you can get some further research. And other than that, tomorrow night we're going to have a rerun show, and then we will be back on Friday. So hope you guys have a great night.